The Ink and Paint Club podcast is intended for mature audiences. These guys can't go about like 3 seconds without saying a swear, so, listener discretion is advised.
I mean, these days at my Halloween, if I can afford it, my Halloween tradition is my theater does a live showing of Rocky Horror Show.
Nice.
And I've gone to that a couple times, and let me tell you, that movie's a lot of fun to watch, but it's way more fun to watch with a crowd who knows the who knows what to say.
I've seen fucking Rocky Horror in the theater so many fucking times that I can't even count. And yeah, I know a lot of the fucking callbacks and all that shit.
I feel bad because I'm one of those people that hates audience involvement when it comes to like theater experiences. So I feel, and especially the way Rocky Horror is, I feel like I would be very uncomfortable there.
You'd be really uncomfortable.
You'd be rice and confetti and toast being thrown everywhere.
People
just like water guns
in
and
bondage gear, like dressing up and stuff, and I'm like, no, thank you.
You're listening to the Ink and Paint Club podcast, your weekly home for animation reviews and discussions.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ink and Paint Club podcast. My name is JD. I died for a bit, but I got better.
Who are you?
I know. I was gone for a bit. Spent a few weeks buried in the ground, but then I rose from my grave, and I'm better now.
We're glad to have you back.
Yeah. Kyle's here.
What's up?
Matt's here.
I'm here, and just really quick, I didn't point it out last week because you weren't here. I wanted everyone here, but it's now been 1 year of me being on the show.
Happy show-iversary, Matt.
Thank you very much.
Yay.
Yeah,
also Aiden's here.
Hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
Aiden's here. I'm glad he could be here for this too. Especially
I'm glad I could be here for this.
Yeah, on a show that he's very much a fan of.
I've been a very big fan of this since at least like 2015. Like, this is legit one of my favorite animes, just in general.
Yeah. So when we were going over like what we should do for Halloween stuff, this was like the first thing that I suggested for this year, because it's just been one of those weird things that I've seen over the last couple of years, and like I don't know, it's spooky. I like its art style, and so I thought it'd be interesting to talk about. And then apparently it is one of Aiden's favorite animes. So I'm like, I know it's made in Japan. I'm hesitant to call it an anime just because of the way it looks, but I guess technically it is.
Yeah.
I from time to time sometimes forget that it's made in Japan, but yeah, it is technically an anime.
So we are talking about Gregory Horror Show. I think this technically aired on TV in Japan, but it's like a series of like 2-minute shorts. I think there's like 20-25 each season. But it's a CG show where all the characters look like little papercraft dolls. It's got a very spooky atmosphere, and very kind of like, I don't even know how to describe its plot.
Wait, I feel a little embarrassed. We're not talking about Alan Gregory show?
No.
Fiona Hill?
No.
I mean, Alan Gregory certainly is a horrific show.
Yeah,
I wouldn't exactly call it a horror show.
Yeah, that's that fucking angle. Oh damn! Don't I got fucking egg on my face? Yeah, this show is like, interesting as hell. It's the whole show just feels like it's like a collection of cutscenes, like for the early PS2 game, which is funny because then they would end up making a PS2 game for the show, like after they'd done all the show.
Right.
And it still retains that same style and aesthetic, and even has some of the, at least for the English dub, still has some of the voice actors, at least for Gregory and some of the other characters.
Although I will point this out, that for those of you that have seen the game, maybe you saw Joel from Vinesauce play it, or maybe you saw the video on Did You Know Gaming about it. But for the record, the voices are a little different. I think the most notable example is Death's voice between the game and the show. In the show, he's just more of a regular Death, whereas in the game,
he's like a New Yorker.
He has this really thick New Yorker accent. Like, Hey, come on, throw away all your
Yeah,
worries.
I
kind of like it though.
Yeah, I caught somebody playing this a couple weeks ago, and I had noticed that Death's voice was different between those two, and it was very off-putting.
When you watch the show, there are subtle differences in all the voices that, when you notice them, they're incredibly hard to not notice.
Mm-hmm.
Like Judgment Boy is also pretty noticeable too.
Oh, Judgment Boy's voice in the game is so bad.
I think it's fine, but it's very different from the show one, and they kind of change his little spiel too. And I think that might just be down to localization. Although it's weird, you think they would just have him watch the dub that they already did.
I mean, it doesn't. It hits differently when he's not going, "Do you know who I am? They call me Judgment Boy." Like, that just hits different, you know?
Yeah, because I think in the game they do something like, "Do you know my name? Judgment!"
I'm an expert on this.
Yeah,
so that's why I'm here.
Yeah. So this show has, I guess, what you consider 4 seasons.
I'd consider it 3.5, really. The 4th season, I'm saying season in quotation marks, it's more of like a half season. So the first 2 seasons of Gregory Horror Show are probably the most unique in that they're almost entirely seen from the first-person perspective of the first or second guest of Gregory House. Mm-hmm. Do you mind if I explain the general gist of the...
Go for it, man.
So the general plot of Gregory Horror Show is there's a hotel in the middle of a forest, and this hotel exists between reality and kind of a dreamlike world. It's sort of implied to be the afterlife. In fact, it's heavily implied to be the afterlife. Gregory House is the place where lost souls who have lost their way come to this hotel and try to escape reality. So we have the first guest, who's a man, and the second guest, who's a woman. Both of them having similar but very different experiences throughout Gregory House as a whole. And a lot of it comes down to the different types of guests they run into. And to me personally, I think the biggest draw of the show is just what kind of crazy fucking guests show up in Gregory House. Because you get a pretty healthy assortment of them.
I've got to say, every time I hear the phrase Gregory House, I just think of Hugh Laurie. Like, I think of House MD. Like, it's my favorite TV doctor.
Understandable. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different residents of Gregory House. We already mentioned Judgment Boy is one of them. He's probably the most, I would say, the fan favorite. Although I also would say he's like the most polarizing, depending on how you look at him.
He's like a really interesting, like he doesn't necessarily operate on like a big old rail, but he looks like he should be, and he's just like a bunch of geometric shapes, and he's got kind of like the 2 scales, like one's like holding a cage with a heart in it, one's holding a cage with like a money symbol in it, and he asks you like fucking like I guess technically hypothetical questions, although I think the questions are actually related to the person they're
usually
asking, right?
Usually the questions seem relevant to, like, because you kind of get hints of like what brought the guests to the hotel in the first place, and usually Judgment Boy's questions are once you kind of get more of their background, they kind of make sense to the guests that they're asking to.
Yeah.
I think it's more the game kind of is more asking about for the stuff that I've seen. I saw like the first hour of the game. It seemed like a lot of the interaction with him seems to be more based on hypotheticals, I think.
Yeah, whereas in the show, he literally looks into your soul and your heart to determine whether or not you would choose your money over your love. Like, it's a weird thing, and like I remember showing this to some friends of mine, and they hated Judgment Boy because they felt like they didn't have a choice. But it's like the dude looks into your soul, and if you have even the slightest inclination of doubt in your soul, you will lose the judgment game.
It was your choice. Now you have to live with it.
Yeah, and there are tons of different. I have like a whole list in front of me right now of like all the different guests and like what they do and what they represent in terms of how they relate to the guests at Gregory House. Admittedly, some of this is partially fan theory because Gregory Horror Show is one of those kinds of things where I've seen it like 20 times and maybe I'm stupid, but I still don't quite get all of it.
I mean, it's a lot of just like I feel like it asks a lot of like philosophical questions, like pertaining to like personal issues, especially with the guests.
I think one of my favorite examples of that in particular is the first introduction of Cactus Gunman, and Gregory says something like, "Are you willing to die because you're unsure of why you're fighting, or will you pick up your gun and fight for something you don't understand or believe in?"
Right.
And it's like, that's weirdly philosophical for a show that looks like this.
And it's a lot of Gregory himself positing these questions, and it's almost interesting because this show is mostly shot from a first person perspective. Yes, there is technically a character that we're seeing a viewpoint, but it's almost like Gregory is addressing the viewer.
Yeah, we get like
these questions too.
We get dialogue from the main character in the first 2 seasons, like during the 15-second intros before the actual show starts.
Right, and that's all you ever see. You never see their body through the actual episode. You never actually hear the person. All the characters react like the character says something to them, but you never actually hear them talk. So it is almost like you are the one being taken through this, but through the eyes of this character.
And that's kind of what I love about it. It's very unique in its like in its way of handling first person storytelling.
Yeah.
In that you're based in that while these are characters, and small spoiler, but the first guest in particular does show up from time to time in the later seasons.
Yeah, he's Inawa Salaryman.
Yeah. But beyond that, it definitely feels more like you yourself are being taken through this fucking surreal journey. And honestly, part of Gregory Horror Show, especially the first 2 seasons, I find, which are my favorite seasons if I'm just throwing them out there, they almost feel kind of Silent Hill-esque in how not just in how like weird it all is, or how genuinely spooky it can be, but also just how, like, again, every different member of the what's the word I'm looking for, of the hotel, all kind of represent something that the guest has, or like a deep-seated desire and or fear of theirs. Like
and that's kind of what was interesting watching the first season. Obviously, if you're listening to this, we're gonna be talking full spoilers. I'm sure you kind of figured that out by now.
Oh, yeah.
But it, like, Gregory, like, halfway through the first season, is basically telling the viewer that, like, hey, we're basically the same person. You're just like a different part of me, and I'm a different part of you. And like, this hotel is just a construct of your reality. So having all these guests are just different facets of the trouble, the personality of the viewer character. It's just interesting seeing like how those, how they relate back to them.
Yeah, and like, I think one of my favorite examples of that is in this first season specifically, because he kind of gets just relegated just to a side thing in the later seasons of the show. But in the first season, when we're introduced to TV Fish, it's like the best introduction, personally, because TV Fish is this ghostly apparition of like a fish skeleton with a TV for a head that is able to like just sort of I guess no clip his way through the mansion however he likes. And I love it. He's like when you look into the television, it's like a fleeting memory of the life you once had before you entered this hotel. And he's constantly moving away, and he's constantly drifting further and further away from you.
Well, what I thought was interesting about that is, like, obviously you kind of learn that, like, the longer you're here, the more you're kind of slipping away from actual reality. So when the TV Fish character pops up, the viewer character like finally catches up with him and stares into the TV and is like getting this, what Gregory reveals to be like, oh, that's one of your memories. But he's also like, sorry for the bad reception. It's only as good as like your memory, and your memory's fading away. So I thought that was kind of an interesting representation.
Yeah. It's like TV Fish is one of my favorites in the first season. Unfortunately, in like the second season, his only real relegation is to a plot point.
Yeah,
which is
I mean,
he doesn't
really show up. He doesn't really show up like that often in general. Anyway, I think I remember him showing up like the one time in season 1, and then the one time in season 2, and then I don't think he shows up at all in the other seasons, right?
Yeah, not really. He's not in the last train, last I remember.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, you've been kind of quiet over there. What's your kind of relationship with this show, and like what's your thoughts so far?
I only watched the PS2 game, so I don't know if what I have is relevant.
Well, no, not necessarily.
Relevant.
I feel like the PlayStation 2 game it seems to be more or less an adaptation of the second season, because I think a lot of the cutscenes they use are from. I'm not entirely certain if every cutscene they use in the game is straight from the show, although I would not be surprised because the entire show looks like that. Like it would be for that purpose.
They're all from the first and second seasons. It's kind of it's telling its own different story, but like it is more or less Gregory Horror Show condensed into a 3.5-hour game.
Yeah, because I did skip ahead and I did see what the ending to the game is, and it's pretty much the ending to season 2. Without some of the context there for some of the things, but I feel like they recontextualize some of the events that you see.
Yeah.
Well,
and like I said, I mean the game like it looks exactly like the show and has like all the characters, and the only difference being some of the voice acting is different. But I'm wondering if the actual Japanese audio track keeps like all the voice actors or anything like that.
Maybe.
But yeah, it's pretty much just a distillation of the show. So even if you just wanted to play the game and didn't want to check out the show, you still get like pretty much the gist of what the series is all about.
Right. But so Kyle, since you're mostly familiar with the game rather than the show, like what do you think about like this world and like what it's presenting?
It seemed cool. I don't know if Capcom is involved with this show or not.
No, Capcom only developed the game.
I found that a bit interesting because the game seemed like it took a lot of inspiration from the first Resident Evil game.
Yeah, I mean it's even got herbs in it.
You use Resident Evil herbs.
That's what I was gonna say. There's herbs and stuff, but it seems like a little fun little world. Personally, I like the New Yorker death.
Yeah,
New Yorker death is best death.
It's a fun interpretation of him.
Yeah, I watched 2 hours of it, and nothing what you guys were saying. I didn't see a TV Fish or anything like that.
But
Probably late game stuff, maybe.
TV Fish is a little later into the game. Like I think pops up. I think he's like the 9th or 10th guest.
Oh, is he actually a guest? Okay.
Yeah, he's in the game. He's just a lot later.
Right.
I forget.
Yeah, I feel like we should definitely contextualize the game too, because whereas the plots to the actual first 2 seasons of the show is more or less like, you know, they're in Gregory House and then they try to escape Gregory House, and then spoilers, they pretty much do, but then eventually at some point in their lives they return to Gregory House because the allure of like an environment so removed from the boring trappings of reality makes them want to return.
That's kind of what I thought was Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's fine.
But what I thought was kind of interesting is that, yes, in the first 2 seasons, both of the guests end up coming back, but I feel like they have like 2 different reasons. Because you have the first guest, the businessman, who, but only to find that it's so mundane that he's like, I'd rather live in this kind of like bizarre dream world, so that he eventually ends up coming back. But at the end of the second season, the zombie cat actually ends up burning down.
I haven't even gotten to Neko Zombie. We haven't even gotten to Neko Zombie yet.
There's so many characters in this, and I do want to go over them. But I thought it was interesting that like the Gregory house is burned to the ground. And like Gregory basically tells the woman character in the second season, like, you know, you like this represents like you like just burning down your reality. And she like even looks off into the distance And Gregory's like, there's nothing out there anymore. So it's like, you really don't have any choice but to stay here. And so that she's kind of just gives up to go back. So it's almost like, I think it's interesting that the first guest goes back of their own volition. The second one goes back because they don't see any other option.
Yeah. Also, it's worth pointing out that we never actually see the second guest after season 2. There is, if you look at the last episode, you can see her shadow, and she has mouse ears now.
Welcome to the family,
becomes
son.
a member of the Gregory family and becomes a mouse.
Right.
They straight up do Resident Evil 7. It's like the Baker family inducting fucking just strangers into the family.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're talking about like there's, I think a lot of what people might draw them into this this series is all like the different kind of hotel guests that show up, because especially in the first season, almost like the first 10 episodes is just like, all right, here's a new character, and we're going to introduce what they're about, and then every episode after that just kind of keeps introducing characters. So you
already went over the art style of the show, right?
Yeah, so it's like everyone is kind of like, it almost seems like they're little papercraft models. It's very geometric, boxy kind of things. Everyone's like very tiny.
Everyone has these very, I would call them like rhombus shaped bodies. They're not like perfect box rectangles. They kind of go downward on their back, and then they just have little flippers for feet and like arms and stuff.
Yeah,
it's a very fun style.
It's very interesting.
For some, maybe like a few viewers out there who might remember it, if you've ever seen the children's show Peccola, it's the same guy who did that. And
I had no idea.
Yeah, fair enough. It was. I think that's even like
more obscure.
That's a little more obscure.
Yeah, I looked into fucking. It was Naomi Iwata, the creator.
Yeah, Naomi Iwata.
I think he's done like 3 other shows aside from this, and they all look exactly the same, like the same style. Like all the animal characters look the same. Of course, the content of them is different. Like Peccola's like more of a kids show. I think he does another like horror cartoon, but it's more.
Okay, I'll briefly touch on this because I also love this.
Sure.
So in between the adult horror cartoon, I'm gonna call it adult horror cartoon because it's pretty adult for the most part. It's not like Gregory Horror Show and the kids cartoon of Peccola. In between those two, there's a show that Naomi Iwata did called Midnight Horror School, which is basically the bridge between those two shows because it's like a kids show, but it's also very horror themed and very horror influenced. It's fun. I'd only recommend it if you understand Japanese because there's no dub or sub. Anyway,
and then apparently he also worked on I don't think the original series, but it's something more recent, like in the last decade. He also worked on a Pingu cartoon.
Yes.
Like a newer
so there was a Pingu cartoon that was made exclusively in Japan called Pingu in the City, and Naomi Iwata was the director of that.
Oh, okay. He was a full-on director. I thought maybe he just like wrote on it or something.
No, he directed it.
Oh, awesome. That's cool.
Yeah. But now back to Gregory Horror Show. Sorry about that mini tangent about Naomi Iwata.
You're fine, man.
Yeah.
Love this dude.
But yeah, there's like a lot of the appeal of the show is like the different characters that we're introduced to, because you got, like we said, there's Judgment Boy, who's like this weird like on rails robot who like postulates hard questions to the character. You've got Catherine, who is this pink lizard nurse who apparently has a lady boner for drawing blood.
She is extremely horny on main.
Yeah.
But like violently.
I did think it's interesting that there's a lot of family characters. So I think one of the first ones we're introduced to are the father-son dogs with the axes in their head.
The Mummy family.
Yeah, the Mummy family. Yeah.
Oh, they're great.
Family. And then you've got the Time Master and his son.
Whose name is my son.
Yeah. And then I don't know how they're related exactly, but then you got the Cactus. I think it's their brother and sister.
Yeah, Cactus Gunman and Cactus Girl are brother and sister.
Yeah. So it's interesting how many family characters you've got. And then it's Neko Zombie, who's like a stitched together like zombie cat.
And like, man, okay, I don't know how this connects to like the whole reality situation, but like Neko Zombie has like a genuinely fucked up backstory where like apparently he was like a cat to a noble family, and then one day, and it's implied that it was Gregory who did this. He took a needle and just sewed every part of Neko Zombie shut to the point where like, yeah, he's just a patchwork quilt of himself.
Mm-hmm.
And now he keeps him locked away in Gregory house. And I like Neko Zombie a lot because, one, he's the only member of the entire house that is outright trying to help you. Like, there's a few here and there that are, like, for example, in season 2, that we're introduced to Gregory's grandson, James.
Yeah.
Who I have listed on here as just a chaotic, neutral little shit. Because
he's a little shit.
All he does is he just gets into trouble and causes problems on purpose.
Oh my god! I think my favorite moment of the show is fucking. There's a bit there where I think it's Cactus Gunman is like fucking hanging Gregory from the rafters, and
Cactus
fucking
Girl,
or Cactus Girl, and then James just runs up and starts hanging off of Gregory as he's hanging from a noose. Like it's like, yay, Grandpa, yay!
Okay, so that also leads me to some questions. James is Gregory's grandson, which implies that Gregory has children, which means he's fucked at some point.
Yeah,
and I don't like to think about that.
I don't know necessarily that's what that means, because I mean, as we see at the end of season 2, they induct like the main character of that series into the family. She's now a mouse now. It could easily be that, hell, maybe even Gregory was drafted in the family originally, because he's kind of at the whims of like his mom, who's like a whole nother story. That's a whole nother kind of bag of worms.
That was an interesting revelation somewhere towards like the end part of season 1, is that like you're always thinking that like Gregory is in charge and like he's pulling the strings of everything, and then you realize that like no, his mom is up in her own room, and like the whole point of this hotel is to like capture wayward souls for his mom. So it's just interesting the way it's set up, and then that revealed like, oh no, Gregory's like, he's not in control at all. He's just kind of working for his mom.
And like that's it, and that actually greatly leads into the 3rd season, The Last Train, which, okay, so the first guest, the second guest, both of them had their horror shows. The best way I could describe season 3, The Last Train, this is Gregory's horror show. Like, this is him.
Like the name of the show.
Yeah. So, like, this is him. So, to explain it to JD and Kyle, the 3rd season is on a train with just Gregory. There is no first-person perspective character. And we just kind of see Gregory on this train, and he keeps running into, like, various, both new and old people that we've seen at the hotel and people we've never seen before. And throughout it, he kind of uncovers his own, like, Gregory horror show style revelations about himself. It's very interesting, and yeah, it is implied that all of the stuff he's done is almost entirely just to appease Gregory Mama.
Mm-hmm.
And
that whole train season is definitely interesting because he interacts with the characters as though he's never met them. So it's either that it either maybe like takes place like in his own psyche where he doesn't have prior relationships with any of these characters, because I mean in the show they are all residents of Gregory house and are all presumably aware of Gregory and everything. So it's kind of weird that their interactions in the 3rd season are kind of maybe not stilted is the wrong word, but it's just very different from how they interact with the rest. So like at first I thought like, oh, maybe some sort of like prequel, like maybe this is how he kind of brings everyone to Gregory house or something. But I think it's more like, because I mean near the end of the season they kind of do reveal like James shows up and he's just like, oh yeah, you're trying to escape from the house and everything else. And
yeah, there are bits where like James and like Neko Zombie shows up again asking him what he's doing and that he needs to go back to Gregory house. And the whole season is basically about Gregory breaking free from the house, as so to speak, his own tortured reality, to break free into his own mystical fantasy land. And I don't quite understand the season totally, even though I've seen it quite a bit. There's a lot of it I'm still a little lost on, especially the ending. I'm unsure, because, like, okay, big spoilers for season 3. but at the end of but the final episode of The Last Train, it shows that the entire adventure took place on like a miniature train set, and the train is just a toy train that Gregory has that he's named Ambition, and like he ends by like parking the train next to a little miniature Gregory house.
Weird.
And that's, again, I don't quite understand it myself, but it's definitely like, it's one of those seasons that really makes you rethink kind of Gregory as a character, and I really enjoy that. I enjoy that a lot. It's just fun to like get. I don't know. This show's just fun. It's fun to think about. I have like a laundry list of theories that I have just in like what all the various members of the hotel mean. Some of them are admittedly straightforward, and some of them only show up like once. Like, the only one that I straight up don't know if he represents anything, in season 1, there's a character who's just called Toilet Baby.
Oh, right. Yeah, we see like a little glimpse of them in season 2, but not much. And then, in season 1, the only purpose is to just flush themselves down the toilet. And they bring the main character with them, too. Like,
that's his deal. I don't think he means anything.
God.
But
it's inherent fear of falling into the toilet when you're a child or something, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, I can see that, but like even then, just that's so fucking weird compared to everyone else. Where you've got someone like the literal next one after that, like Roulette Boy, who shows up in the games as well. And like he's a really fun character. He's one of my favorites. He's great, and I like how his whole idea is. This is more just my personal take on it, and that's all I can really give, because the show is mostly, because every episode's 2.5 minutes long, you have just enough to sort of get the gist of what's going on, and I feel like you can kind of make your own ideas as to what they all mean afterward. Yeah. And for Roulette Boy, it's like, no matter how unpredictable life can be, with the roulette wheel, everybody ends up on the same path, and everybody ends up at the same goal, death. The afterlife. That's kind of my take on it. I could honestly be reading way too deep into this show, but honestly, I don't care at this point. I've watched it like 20 times, and there's parts of it that I'm still just like, I just love thinking about because it's so fucking interesting.
Well, that's the quality about the show, I feel, is because a lot of it is so like abstract that it leads to a lot of being able to construct like theories and stuff about like what the characters represent or like the world and that sort of thing. And I think that definitely gives it some life outside of the very short-lived. I mean, like, yeah, it's 3 seasons, but I think they were broadcast between like 1999 and 2002, I think.
Yeah, sometime around that.
Yeah, and then I think the game came out like a year after that. So yeah, and I don't know. Well, actually, you might know a bit more about this than we do, but I heard that they were potentially working on a new series.
So yes, there was back in 2015 or so. There was an announcement of Gregory Horror Show Horror Holiday, which was one of a small collection of different shorts, like animated shorts created by Naomi Iwata. Produced by Polygon Pictures, who, for those of you that name may sound familiar, they did the cutscenes and trailers for Street Fighter Cross Tekken. They did the Godzilla CG movies recently, and so yeah, they currently have the rights to Gregory Horror Show, and they announced this in 2015 along with a bunch of other really Naomi Iwata style cartoons. Like one of them I remember was called Panko. And it was about this adorable little dog with who's got like a pancake on his head, and it's about just a bunch of cute characters who are all themed after sweets. And like this was supposed to like be a compilation kind of show, but as of 2020, this just been radio silence. Like I don't know if the show is happening or if it was canceled. I know that there was a series of line stickers made for Gregory Horror Show with the new designs. But
well, they also did a mobile
nothing.
game. Like the most recent thing that actually come out was like a mobile game, right? I think they came out with 2020.
Like I didn't even know about that until I saw the Region Locked Did You Know Gaming video on that. But yeah, there was apparently also a dungeon crawling mobile game based on Gregory Horror Show. I'm pretty sure it's defunct by this point, but like yeah, you can look into that too.
So that's pretty interesting that they would. I wonder if that was maybe supposed to be a lead-in for the new series, and maybe since they got postponed or whatever happened with it.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's probably on the back burner somewhere because Naomi Iwata was busy directing Pingu in the City.
I could see that.
Look. Sometimes you got to take priority. And
sometimes you got to newt.
Sometimes you got to newt to take priority.
You got a newt, man.
You got a newt.
Yeah. But yeah, so I only got to watch through the first 2 seasons of this, and found it really interesting, especially because you don't see a lot of shows that are shot from the first person's perspective. So I guess like that kind of like extra level of engagement to the viewer was kind of what brought me in. But knowing that the other 2, I guess what would say, Aiden, you were saying season and a half.
Yeah, so the Bloody Carte is like, it's only 12 episodes.
It was like a side series on the DVD, I think, is what it said.
Yeah.
Yeah, where I think it just deals with Catherine working at a hospital, but
it's a fun little half season, but it's like it doesn't give you the general gist of like what the main show's about.
Right.
It is almost entirely just a dark comedy series that uses the characters from Gregory Horror Show.
Yeah.
As opposed to being a proper Gregory Horror Show.
What I was gonna say is that I like that the stylistic choice they chose for the first 2 seasons, but knowing that season 3 and 4 are entirely from like those characters, like Gregory and Catherine's perspectives. I don't know how much I would enjoy that. I do want to check them out eventually because I do think this world that they set up and all these characters, I do think that's interesting. But I wonder if it almost loses some kind of level of engagement just from switching back to a third person perspective, having the viewer watching characters rather than the viewer almost be an analog for the character.
To some extent, yes. However, I don't think it's enough to really deter The Last Train from being like the bad season.
Yeah, no, I feel like they're still very entertaining in their own rights, but yeah, season 1 and 2 are definitely the more interesting of the bunch just because of the shifted perspective from most things that you have watched in cartoons.
Right.
If it convinces you any further that why you should watch this or why you shouldn't, depending on your perspective, there's a fucking bit where Gregory raps. And it's simultaneously the funniest and cringiest thing ever, and I love it.
That's my Discord icon right now.
Yeah, it's great.
Got the beanie on.
I was wondering what that was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to check them out eventually. But I'm a little weary just from knowing that the perspective shift that they take. And mostly because it's like I enjoy Gregory being as like an antagonist rather than being the protagonist. I like him being almost like this, like he's setting this up for the character. I don't know how much I would enjoy watching him having to go through this, especially because I don't take Gregory as like an actual character, but rather like how a lot of these characters are more manifestations. So seeing him going through his own kind of like inner turmoil journey just seems a little out of place for me, I guess. But I don't know. I guess I would have to check it out to be sure.
I think I understand what you're getting at. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like even if Gregory's supposed to be more in line with like a personification of like some sort of like, I don't know. I still feel like he's a very fun character. Like he definitely works on his own, like in that season. Yeah, no, Gregory seems like he'd be a fun grandpa. Like he's like he's your typical like porn reading, beer drinking, like at least in that season, like just causing mischief. Like,
yeah, if you are looking more for that like OG first person perspective Gregory Horror Show experience, there is a manga. I don't know if it's fully translated, but there is a Gregory Horror Show manga that was made.
I don't think it retains that aesthetic. I think they actually draw out the characters, right?
Yeah, no, and here's the thing. It's good. It's a completely different art style, and I take it how you will. I personally love the change of art style because it makes Gregory go from like this adorably kind of weird looking mouse to a terrifying, creepy old crooked mouse. The way
is that when they start drawing him like all spindly and
yeah.
I've seen art of it where they're not box characters anymore. They're actually like the actual
characters.
Yeah, actual characters, not just like little paper box people.
But it is just something I would recommend. I haven't read it myself, but I've read like at least the first 2 or 3 chapters, and it is very much closer to the like obviously it's not first person perspective. You do have a protagonist character, but it is closer to that kind of Gregory horror show you're thinking of.
Gotcha. Huh. Yeah, I might have to check that out too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind checking that out at some point either. Yeah, I would really like to see more content, and that's really what I would really like to check out the game at some point, because it's just seems like more of like what I liked about the show, and kind of having that interactive element attached to it. It's definitely like, I think maybe it might turn off some people because it's definitely like in third person, so you do have like a player character and stuff. But I feel like certain areas of the game you do play in first person. If there's not an option to play it entirely in first person, I couldn't gather that from the video that I saw.
I've heard a thing that you can do you can do first person mode, but you'll walk. Like, you can't run. And the whole point of the Gregory Horror Show game Soul Collector is you have to run away and avoid all of the different guests before they catch you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. However, there are first person perspectives for like if you're, so one of the mechanics is that you can hide in a cupboard or hide in a closet, and you get a first person perspective during that as to like make sure they don't catch you.
Right, and I think there were certain areas of the game I saw where like they were walking down like library halls and stuff where it shifted in the first person, and I wasn't sure if that was manually activated or if that was automatic or something. Because yeah, for the most part, it seems to have like a lot of it's more akin to like Resident Evil Code Veronica than the other older Resident Evils, because it does have some fixed camera angles, but the camera does actually follow you around, and like the entire environment is actually rendered out and everything. Yeah, so it's it's very interesting, and I would definitely like to check it out someday. And I'll probably check out that manga too, because having this character in these settings done in an entirely different style does sound like it'd be interesting too. Because the way you made it sound, it seems like more like, when I was watching the show, I kind of got like some Crypt Keeper vibes from Gregory, and I feel like maybe the manga maybe leans more into that.
I think visually it definitely leans more into that. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, it's interesting. I go to be interesting in checking that out at some point.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you guys want to bring up about this before we start?
I have this. So me and my friend have the. Okay, it's sort of a crackpot theory of season 2, and this is like big spoilers for the first 2 seasons, but like. JD, you'll kind of might get what I mean when I explain it from season 2. So I have this crazy theory, where the second guest of season 2 is a woman, and here's my take on it: the woman in the second guest.
Oh, I think I've heard this.
Yeah, is a person who was somehow related to the first guest, Haniwa Salesman.
So that's what I was reading the Wikipedia article for this, and I think they mentioned that it's kind of implied that the protagonist from the first season was somehow involved romantically with the second season protagonist sometime in the past.
It's implied that Haniwa Salesman is the second protagonist's ex, right, and he married her best friend, and that is probably one of, if not just the handful of reasons why she eventually came to the hotel.
Yeah, because they say that like when she just came from her best friend's wedding, so it makes me wonder if that was the wedding she was coming back from, is her ex marrying her best friend or something.
And I have 2 other things that heavily imply this. First of all, the first guest that the second guest meets. First person she meets is Haniwa Salesman aka the first guest.
Mm-hmm.
And the other main one I have is when you go to this one guy, Kabuki Banzai. He's a dude. He has a third eye, and when you look into his third eye, he looks into your deepest fantasies. And when he looks into her fantasies, he sees a wedding, and at the altar is Haniwa Salesperson. So just. It's a theory,
A game theory?
A game theory.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Sorry.
It's fine. I was. Yeah, it's just like a theory that I have, but like, you know, it's a fun theory to think about because like I kind of it's neat to see if like how the two seasons interact, like go
Link
from one
up.
another, link
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, that's just a crackpot theory, but it's one that I think it holds some water.
Interesting.
Kyle's any of this made it sound more appealing to you? Would you check out the show in general?
The comic looked interesting. I mean, if I would have seen where the show came from first, I probably would have watched it instead of the fucking game. But
Right.
oh well.
Oops.
Yeah.
Wah, wah.
Sorry, spoilers for Kyle.
Eh.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, I think that'll just about do it for this week. I hope everyone, if you haven't checked out Gregory Horror Show and you're not turned off by everything we said, definitely check it out. You can find every episode on YouTube. That's how we all watched it, I assume. It's an interesting watch. Really doesn't take that long. I think each season's maybe an hour.
I'd recommend. Basically, every season is like an hour and a half long movie.
Yeah, just, you know, it stops every 2.5 minutes to show you a new intro.
Yeah.
I was watching the first season like right after my wife went to bed, and I would have to like hold the remote in my hand because for some reason the YouTube video I was watching, the scream that happens at the beginning of every episode was just like unusually louder than everything else. So I'd have to mute it for a few seconds just to get over that part.
That's understandable.
Yeah. But yeah, I think especially during the Halloween season, I think this is a fun little thing to watch. And I think just from the art style alone, I could recommend this. But I think from the weird like metatextual stuff that it brings up, the weird philosophical questions, it's definitely something to kind of ponder on. It has a little bit of a deeper meaning beyond its like weird cartoony art style and kind of like silly stuff that happens. And there's some there's some seriously kind of creepy stuff in there. Hidden below the cute art style. So
I won't lie. The first time I watched season 1, the character, specifically Lost Doll, did get me a couple times.
Dude, the doll is creepy because it's like set up as like this little girl looking for her doll, and I like that she
is the doll.
Yeah, she is the doll she's looking for, and Gregory's like, yeah, she's just weird like that, you know. But it like jumps right at the screen, like screams at you like some weird Five Nights at Freddy's shit.
Yeah.
Just another night at Gregory house.
Exactly. So yeah, guys, definitely check this out. And let us know what you guys think of this show. Because I'd be interested to hear like any other theories or thoughts you guys have on this show. If you'd like to do that, we do have a Facebook, a Twitter, a Discord, where you can comment on this. You can also comment on the YouTube page. And if you're not already, we are available on pretty much every streaming site, so you can take us on the go if you'd like. And I would like to put out there that if you do enjoy our show, we have been getting a slight influx of new viewers lately, and I do appreciate that.
Thank you.
But if you wouldn't mind, if you think any of your friends or your followers would find this show interesting, to just go ahead and maybe share it with them, because sharing is caring, everybody, and it helps our show grow, our little underground indie show grow.
Our Gregory Horror Show.
Our Gregory Horror Show. Yeah. But I think that'll do it for this week. Stay safe, everybody. If you are in America, go vote, because I think voting day happens before the next episode of this comes out.
Early electing has just started the day we recorded this.
My early voting's been going for the last month, and I went and did that today.
My early voting just started.
Nice. Well, everybody go vote. It's important. But stay safe out there. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween!
And we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Ink and Paint Club podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up with the show. Join our Discord and chat with us. Links are in the description. We'll see you next time.